Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Damon Lembi, welcome to the conversation today.
John, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Bay Area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the intersection of leadership and lifelong learning. It was fun chatting with you in the pre-interview, just getting to know you a little bit. And, you know, this whole idea of lifelong learning, it's 100% what I'm all about. Anyone who's been listening to the podcast for any amount of time, you know, I'm a full-time professor. That's my first time love and full-time gig. And so that's what I'm doing day in and day out. And I do consulting and things like this podcast and other things as well on the side. But that's what I always am doing. But then of course I'm teaching leadership. I'm doing research in the space of leadership. I'm consulting around leadership and executive effectiveness and leadership and such. And 100% believe these two things are wedded. And effective leadership requires lifelong learning. And I know, Damon, this is really 100% around your philosophy. So I'm super excited to be able to unpack this with you and to discuss really in detail what this all means. As we get started, I wanted to share Damon's bio with everybody. Damon Lembi is a two-time best-selling author, the host of the Learn It All podcast, and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. Drawing from his prior baseball career, Damon brings an athlete's perspective to leadership. Through his journey, he has gained invaluable insights into what helps organizations grow, how great leaders learn, and why Learn It All companies outpace their competitors every time. And again, I love that bio. I love everything about it. And 100% learning organizations are going to beat their competitors. So, Damon, what else would you like to share with the audience by way of your background, personal context before we dive on in further?
Well, I mean, we're definitely both on the same page about the importance of learning and leadership. I've been at Learn It for 29 years. We're a live learning platform. Prior to that, I played baseball and I learned great lessons there on leadership. And that's really where I picked up the importance of learning agility. Because when you're playing sports, you go up to the plate, you strike out, you gotta, sometimes you get feedback, but you gotta take the learnings you have and then put them into practice, within 30 minutes, your next at bat. So I didn't realize it at the time, but what I learned playing baseball was able to carry over to my career. And learning has been not only the services we provide our customers, but a huge part of my life professionally and personally.
Yeah, that real-time learning, that real-time feedback when you're a baseball player, I did little leagues. I'm not athletic. I'm certainly no major league baseball player. I did 6 years of little league. I was a decent fielder, not so decent batter. But I can at least somewhat, on the margins relate. Yeah, batting's hard, And so you go up to bat and it doesn't go so well. Yeah, you are learning on the job, right? You're getting that
100%.
real-time feedback. And so sports is a real great there's a reason why we use sports as a metaphor for leadership all the time, or a metaphor for teams all the time, a metaphor for learning all the time, because you are gaining those skills and there are all those attributes that directly relate back to what we experience in very real ways in the workplace. And learning, absolutely, there's that real-time feedback that you're receiving. You take a shot in basketball, it either goes in or it doesn't go in. If you're, off to the side or you went too hard, you get that feedback immediately, and if you need to make a correction, right?
Absolutely. And the same is, I believe the same goes when it comes to leadership, because you go in, let's say you either give a presentation or you have a one-on-one, there's always learning opportunities, not only, John, for yourself, but also the team members that you coach. And of course, Learn It does things like we have our, formal learning programs, but there's also, like you mentioned, so many great opportunities for in the moment learning opportunities. And really, that's what I think it comes to where the intersection is and what really helps create what we like to call learn it all learning cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the real-time opportunities are fantastic. That's why it's wonderful when we have a dynamic of and a culture of learning where everyone can be a mentor and a coach to everyone else, where a leader, a supervisor, sees it as their role to constantly be providing that coaching, that mentoring, and that feedback to the people around them. That's the differentiator, I think, to just have that constant environment of everyone just helping each other and providing that real-time feedback. I'm thinking back to, I don't even remember the details, but there's this really impactful, kind of cheesy video I remember watching back when I was an undergrad student. Um, in like an organizational behavior class or something like that, the teacher shows this video. And it was just so impactful because it was like these blue collar workers down at the dock, and this transformation that happens in this team of these rough, swearing, not particularly well educated, these people that you wouldn't think, on the face of it, just by the looks of it, you wouldn't think that these people would necessarily be like the prime candidates to establish like this learning organization, this dynamic or this culture of coaching and mentoring and constant learning and growth. And yet that's exactly what happens with this team, with this organization. And over the arc of like this 6 months and this year, you see this transformation happening in this like 10-minute video that where they're kind of showing how this happens. And I just remember the light bulb going off in my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, if that can happen in an organization like that with that kind of workers, you think about that happening at like a Google or something like that. But if it can happen with blue collar workers, um, it could happen with anybody. Like you can literally do that with anybody. It's all about mindset. It's all about developing that type of culture where everyone knows that they're expected to learn and grow and that they're expected to hold each other accountable for learning and for personal growth.
I didn't see the video. It sounds great, but I also believe, John, it all starts with leadership. It starts at the top. If you want to create a culture of leadership, you need the senior leaders, the CEO, the C level team to buy into it, and not only buy into it by investing and saying, "Hey, go out and do it," by also participating, rolling up their sleeves, and actually getting involved, participating in the trainings, and making sure that they're giving their team members space to learn. I like to call it learning time off, LTO, right? So it's one thing to just, invest money in it, but it's also making sure that people carve out the time that they have to be able to do training. And then learning outside of the formal classroom, as we were just talking about, the importance of being able to learn, be curious, and try things on the job. And if things don't go right, you got to create a culture that you have a psychologically safe space where
Yeah.
it's okay to fail, right? And people need to know that their leadership has their back. They're either going to be supportive or they're going to help them come in and correct it. Because if people feel like that they're in an organization where they can't fail, well, if they can't fail, then they're not going to take chances. And if they're not going to take chances, they're really not going to grow and they're not going to learn. And I'm sure you feel the same way, I think a lot of the best learning opportunities come from failure. So it starts with leadership. And if you're a leadership team that you think you know it all and you have it all figured out and you're not vulnerable and asking for help, I think you're going to get, for lack of a better term, stomped on and just left behind.
Yeah, yeah. And I think part of that is, we live in such uncertain times, such volatile times, the rapid pace of change that we're in. If we have any hope of being relevant in the future of work, we have to be adaptive, right? And
100%.
how in the world can you be adaptive if you're not constantly learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at there's studies out there that show that the lifespan of skills now are about 6 months. So
Yeah,
let's say you're a computer science major, you're graduating in June. You By the time January comes around, you need a whole new skill set. So how are you going to be able to keep up and continue to learn and grow? Or how are you going to be able to be productive if you're not constantly learning and evolving?
Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what with this kind of lifelong learning mentality, this culture of learning mindset, and trying to create that dynamic within your team. What can leaders do to lead in uncertain times?
Well, I think what leaders can do to lead in uncertain times, like right now, for instance, because there's a lot of chaos in the world, right? Whether it's politics or whether it's uncertainty about the market. First and foremost, I think it's really important for leaders to be transparent with their team and communicate as much as possible. Because if teams, I mean, people are seeing that there's layoffs going around out there, and if you're not transparent with your team with where things are at, then people in their mind, John, they kind of make up their own story. Like
Yep. Yep.
I don't know, use Learn It as a case. I don't know how Learn It's doing. Maybe we're struggling. And I think that a lot of times leaders are afraid to be transparent because they're like, okay, well, people are going to get either too stressed out or they're going to quit. What I've always
Hmm.
found in working with the customers we work with is that if you are transparent, then people will kind of like you'll see a relief in them. They'll get focused on their job, and I think that that's really where great ideas come from, because they'll all get on the same page and they'll know where things stand, and you'll get ideas bubbling up. People get curious, they'll try to find ways to be innovative and help your company instead of you being guarded. So to me, leading in uncertain times is about being transparent and over communicating. And I was always a big fan of Winston Churchill, and how he handled the Battle of Britain, right, where he was very honest with the country, what was going on, but he was also, at the end of the day, he was positive. He's like, let's work together and we can get through this. So I think that those are my three tips for leading in uncertain times.
Yeah, and I like you said, I see it all the time, and I mean sometimes maybe there are nefarious reasons for why leaders aren't more transparent, why they don't share more, and why they hold information close to the vest. But in uncertain times, I think really oftentimes it's like you just said, they're worried about sharing information that are going to upset their people. That they don't know all the information, and
Right.
so they're waiting to learn more. They're waiting till they have a clear picture to be able to share with their people. I think that's a very common situation. In fact, right now at my home university, we're in that kind of a situation because Utah happens to be like Florida and Texas. Utah happens to also be a very politically conservative state, and so we have our legislature has passed some bills that impact the public university system, similar to Florida and Texas. And so there's some dynamics happening politically that are impacting the university that we're still not quite sure how it's all going to play out. We're not sure what all the implications are. So we actually find ourselves in that exact situation right now. And I can tell you from the faculty perspective, kind of, we just want to know, like, we just want some updates. And I don't need to know all the details. I don't even need specifics, and I don't need definite answers. I just want updates. I just want to know, like, what kind of conversations are happening. Is there some sort of a strategy? Just something. I would just love some sort of updates. And radio silence is not what I want. And that's what we're getting, and that's where people then start to fill in the gaps. Like you say, people just start to make stuff up. People start to gossip. They just start to like go to the worst case scenario, and people start freaking out. And so, in times of uncertainty, leaders may think they're doing the best thing by holding cards close to their vest and waiting until they have something to say. Um, but really, they may be hurting their cause. They may be making things worse. And if you can be a little bit more open, a little bit more transparent, trust your people to have those open conversations, even if that just means, hey, we don't actually really know what the implications are right now. We're exploring this. We're thinking through it. We'll let you know when we have updates, etc. That will go a long way in building trust with your people.
100%. And that's what I was just piggybacking on what you said, that's what I was talking about over communicating. Yeah, you don't have to get into all the details and there's some things that people don't need to know, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I think it's about being consistent and just not going radio silent. And another thing is during uncertain times, it's to have empathy for your team, and maybe even when you can get together with them on a regular basis and just ask them how they're doing. I think great leaders are also, if you get a group together and just say, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? Giving them an opportunity to speak as well and open up the floor where they could ask questions. There's just staying connected, I think
Hmm.
is so important during challenging times.
Yeah, and that empathy piece, I think we need to consider. I mean, especially in this kind of post-COVID world, there was a lot of talk about leading with empathy during COVID. People were dealing with a lot, heightened anxieties, lots of burnout. I think people recognize, yeah, we need to have a lot of empathy during that time. Maybe it hasn't been talked about quite as much since then, but we need to remember that that's still really important. I'm wondering if you see a connection between this lifelong learning idea and leading with empathy, especially in uncertain times.
Well, I think the yes, the members of your team who probably need the most empathy and have a lot of challenges right now are really the middle managers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they got the executives who are pulling them in one direction and they're trying to take care of their team, and so they're pulled in both directions. So for senior leaders, you got to have empathy for your middle managers, and that's where the lifelong learning helps out too. It's like help give them some of the skills or that they need to be successful, whether it's coaching or whether it's mentorship. But you got to be mindful of what's going on with them. So I definitely think that there's a correlation between continuous learning, empathy, and dealing with leading during uncertain times. And especially even if your organization is going through downsizing and you're letting have to let people go, I really believe, John, that's a critical time to invest in learning for your team because the tasks and the responsibilities, they don't go away. They're still there. So
Yeah.
you have less people who are probably, by the way, freaked out and demoralized
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
their friends and coworkers are gone. They feel like, things aren't going well here. But if you invest in them in training, coaching, learning, whatever it is you can do, you're helping rescale them to be more productive. And even outside of work, you're showing them that, hey, my organization still cares for me. So I think that that's a way to show empathy as well when it comes to learning. And also, it's going to help your organization because, like I said, those tasks and responsibilities don't go away. They're still there.
Yeah, yeah. Your point about middle management in particular, we often talk about leaders having empathy for frontline workers. During the pandemic, we talked about first responders, et cetera. Absolutely. We need to have empathy for frontline workers, customer facing, first responders, et cetera. Absolutely. But yeah, what about middle managers? Get stuck in between, they get sandwiched and they
It's
have so much
tough.
pressure. It's tough. They get so much pressure and they carry that weight day in and day out. And a lot of times they're the forgotten kind of behind the scenes heroes
Yeah.
that that really just carry such a burden. And when you talk about burnout, middle managers often carry a lot of the brunt of that because frankly, they're expected to provide that empathy and that compassion and the support for their team, and they don't really have anyone providing it for themselves, right? So that's super important. Um, you mentioned something else. I think it ties directly into lifelong learning and a culture of learning, a culture of growth and development within our organizations. And that really is just having curiosity, like staying curious, having an experimentation culture. Um, and I think if we're having empathy for our people, then we create a psychologically safe place where people feel like they can try stuff. Like when I think of someone who has no empathy or no compassion, they're like so, just like by the book driven, so compliance based. Like everyone's just kind of fearful. And in that environment, nobody's trying anything. People kind of show up, they do their work, they're by the book. They kind of keep their head down, do what they need to do their job, and do it well enough that they don't get fired. And they're certainly not trying anything above and beyond because they're just afraid of being noticed. And if they're noticed, chances are something will get noticed that will get someone upset at them, right?
Oh,
Because
totally.
everyone's going to do something that isn't going to be always right. Nobody's perfect, and you're going to mess up at some point. And so, if you have empathy, compassion, you recognize that everybody's human. You recognize that everyone's going to quote fail, and in fact, you're going to recognize that failure is only failure if you're not learning from it. And so, you create this environment where curiosity wins the day. Like you actually want people to experiment. You want people to iterate rapidly. You want them to try things out. And in fact, the only failure is if you don't learn from what you did. If you try something and it didn't work, and then you just repeat it, yes, that's a failure. But if you try something, especially if you fall forward, fail fast, any of these kind of generic
Terms, right?
sayings,
Yeah.
but they mean something. If you do that, and you're not like losing the company tons of money, but you're trying something that matters because you learn from it and you grow from it, and then you're going to help the company move forward from it. That's what drives innovation, right?
Well, first of all, you said you want them to do that. I disagree. You need them to
You
do
need
that.
them. Yeah.
You need them to do that. You need them. And I think curiosity is a through line uh, through all of this to come to creating a great learning culture. You want your people to be curious. You want them to try. You want them to go out there, iterate, try, fail, learn. When we bring in, when we hire people at Learn It, or when I'm coaching our customers, the very first conversation I have with everybody is, look, we're bringing you here, and if you're just going to be on a railroad tracks and just head down and just do your job, then I don't want you here. There's
Yeah.
really nothing. I mean, this isn't heart surgery, so there's really nothing you're going to do that's going to blow up the organization. So I want you to go out there and I want you to try things. Okay. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't work, then it's fine to make mistakes, but kind of like you just said, but let's just not make the same mistake 10 times. Let's learn from that mistake, um, and then make different mistakes. But try, go out there, do things. And I think that that's one of the things I've been able to surround myself with a great team over the years, and I think that that's one of the reasons is because not just me, but my leadership team has given people the safe space to try and have fun, and if things fail, they fail. And also, I think it's important and I don't think it's really failure until you give up,
Yeah.
anyways, right?
Yeah.
Because if you learn from it, then great. But I also think it's important that if senior leaders make a mistake, then just be open about it. Like, hey, I messed this up. This is what happened. And by the way, maybe I could turn to you to help me with it. I mean, I think that it's important to be vulnerable, to have compassion for people. And then it just creates a much more vibrant organization, because when you said, head down and you don't want to get noticed, I mean, that's just freaking miserable for people.
It is
It,
for
it's re-
everybody.
it's just miserable, and you're not going to push your organization forward. And the worst part about it is, my book is called The Learn It All Leader. There's learn it alls and there's know it alls. The worst is the leaders who are know it alls. They think they have all the answers, and they're the bottleneck in an organization, right? Because everybody has to come to them for something, and everybody else is afraid to make mistakes, and I think it's just miserable. So, uh, I think the human aspects of leadership and what we've talked about today is critical, John, now more than ever with the rapid change of AI and the uncertainty in the world. So you just got to give people a little grace, give them an opportunity to make mistakes, try to make it fun, have patience for your team, and celebrate their wins, and just make sure that they know that you have their back if things don't go
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I love that. I love all of that. Well, Damon, this has just been a really fun conversation. I think we've only scratched the surface. There's a whole lot more we could talk about in terms of creating this learning organization to promote lifelong learning. But I think we've touched on some really great points around leadership to create some of this dynamic. But I do note the time. I need to let you go here in just a minute. Before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Okay. So connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast. Maybe John, maybe one day you'll come on. It's called The Learn It All Leader. It's a lot of fun. We bring on great leaders and hear their stories. And go to learnit.com. Yeah, that's our website for all our classes. If you find something there you like, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'll give you a free class, on emotional intelligence, critical thinking. Just let me know. And my final words on the topic is I like to say that, well, first of all, I think we're all leaders, right? So whether you're an individual contributor, a parent, or you're leading a Fortune 500 company, we're all leaders. And my little saying I like to say is that great leaders aren't born or made, they're constantly in the making. So always stay curious and keep learning.
I love it. I love it. Damon, thank you so much. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Damon and his team can do for you. Check out his book, his other resources. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.